Good morning, everyone. Warm welcome from Vienna. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Making It in Austria. I'm your host, Adela. And today, as always, I have a very special guest, Alexandra Dolea. And you will see why she's so special and why I'm so excited about it, as she's the first archaeologist on my show. Alexandra, warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. So I'm so excited about it. And we just met briefly at the last Making It in Austria get together. And thanks to our wonderful Amy. She brought you, and I'm so grateful for Amy and for you today, where you can share a little bit about your journey, your life, your story, and as well as how did you find your way to Austria. So, Alexander, for the ones who don't know you yet, so can you introduce yourself in a couple of sentences?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Alexandra. I'm an archaeologist. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I'm originally from Romania. I studied in Bucharest, my bachelor, master, and PhD at the University of Bucharest. And I never planned to be an archaeologist. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, it was my dream to be an archaeologist. My dream was to be a veterinarian, and here we are. So it was definitely not something like this. But in the first year at the faculty, when I was studying my bachelor in Bucharest, I had to choose my practice. So one of the choices was to do a practice on an excavation site. So I chose this. It was in the western side of the country towards the Black Sea, and it's called Tropeontreani. It's an ancient Roman site, and this is where a lot of my colleagues did the practice. So I also joined there. And yeah, it was like a virus, you know, like a no return point. Like I never wanted to leave. Actually, I left, I returned to Bucharest, and then I came back for a second round of practice. And then I went back to Bucharest and I started to look at other, you know, possibilities. And I think a colleague found another collaboration with the local museum in Bucharest, and I went for another, I don't know how many months, somewhere around Bucharest for an excavation. So I started really, really hard. Let's say I fell very hard for archaeology. So this is how it started. It was my first year on excavations. It was in 2006. So yeah,
Wow, that's the
that's how
year.
it started.
Yeah. That was a big year in my life as well, 2006. I was still in Sarajevo and I got my scholarship to continue my bachelor studies. So it's been a while. So thank you for bringing that one. I'm just curious, Alexandra. So since you're an archaeologist, so what is one thing or two things that you have in your bag? So is it always like the loop? And I don't know the right word. Is it a spoon or so like so? So how do
No, it's called a trowel. Now it's like a triangular tool with which you can excavate properly. But I would say for archaeology, I think it's very important to have always a bottle of water with you because we are usually in remote places in the middle of nowhere. And if you're fainted on the margin of the trench, not in the trench, let's say on the margin of the trench, it's safer. I think a bottle of water would be much more, you know, useful in a lot of cases, but definitely a trowel, I would say. And if you don't have a mobile phone, and if we go back in time, I would say compass, so you know where you're headed if
you?
you're lost in the wild, let's say. But there are a lot of tools. Like there are a lot of tools that we are using, and it's such a big difference. And I can see how the things developed, and I remember how we started, and with the tools that, you know, not only for excavation but documentation, because this is also part of what I'm doing. I'm also popularizing archaeology for people to understand that archaeology is not only Indiana Jones, and that's a very useful tool to also promote archaeology and at a big Hollywoodian scale, I would say. But there is so much work behind the glamorous, you know, field work and saving, you know, artifacts and everything. Like this idealistic image would like us to perceive archaeology. There is really a lot of work from a lot of people from various disciplines. So archaeologists also have a lot of specialties, and they are not only fieldwork archaeologists. There are a lot of archaeology specialists specialized on anything what crosses your mind, because everything what we find has a value, because it has a meaning, because it's there. So it helps us recompose the puzzle at the end of the day, and gets us a bit closer to understanding how the life of communities happened, and what they wanted, how they wanted to live their life or their afterlife, or what they prayed to, or what they were cooking, or where they were sleeping, or whatever, where they were playing, or getting drunk, or whatever. Everything is part of the everyday life. And this is important. Everything has its place in our study, and it's an interdisciplinary work, and it's really a lot of work behind, and a lot of work after the excavation itself.
Right before we started recording, we were talking that we are traveling, so we are going for holidays, and you soon will be going to one of those sites.
Yes.
Can you explain us a little bit? So how does that come together? So where do you dig? So where do you look for those places? How does that come together? So, and can you walk us through it? Because are there some sites here in Vienna that you are looking into it? I mean, in Austria, or is it usually far remote? I'm curious about all those aspects. So where do you go and how do you decide?
So everybody also has a specialty, also region-wise. In theory, of course, as an archaeologist with our tools, we would be capable to, as a field person, I would be capable to excavate everywhere, but this is not how it works. You need permits and you need a lot of authorizations, because things are going according to the law nowadays, as it should be. Because before, when the archaeology was at the beginning, it was more related to antiquaries and people who were collecting, and people who were like pseudo, scientists, or people who were having an interest, because the job was not existing like a few centuries ago. And this is how it works nowadays, that we are either going, there are different types of excavations. There are systematic excavations, the ones that are happening every year regularly for a certain amount of time. Some excavations, they are happening for hundreds of years, or over 100 years, over 100 years, because it takes a lot of time. If you're doing things properly, it's not in a hurry. This is a very, very challenging job that requires a lot of patience, right? Because it's an invasive job, and you're dealing with things. So if you're doing a mistake, you can't put the soil back and say, "Oops, maybe next time it's gonna be better." No, it depends on you, and it brings you a lot of responsibility and a lot of power. This is why a lot, people are dreaming about it, because it has a very, very catchy feeling, and it's very addictive, I would say. This feeling of discovering things that were covered hundreds and thousands of years ago. But going back to your question, so they are the so-called surveys. So I'm going to start how it used to be before the digitalizing era. So people would go on the fields, like archaeologists, let's say, but beforehand they would study. If they are interested in the area, they would study archives, and they would try to see if there were publications beforehand mentioning either ruins, either some objects, ancient objects or prehistoric objects found in the area of their interest. So you're doing some research work beforehand. And then you go in the field itself. Especially, there are some dedicated times when it's better, to go after a plowing or something like this. If it's field, if it's in the middle of, field work, and then you will see scattered materials. And depending on the type of the survey, you will collect them and study them, or you will just register them. And then, with your specialist, you will determine the time frame when this is working. So the chronology, is it from ancient Roman times? I'm giving an example. Is it from prehistory, from Neolithics? Is it from Middle Ages, whatever? And then you enter in further details. And then based on the finds, the quality, the frequency, whatever, you can decide if you can open and do excavations, which these are very invasive again, and they require also afterthoughts and afterwards other projects of restoration conservation, because let's say it's easy to uncover past remains, but it's not so easy to preserve them. And, you know, not always they are available for the public. If they're in the middle of nowhere, sometimes it's better to cover them back, you know, after you did your research. So let's say this is how it was done, and it's still, these methods are still used, but now you have, so it was the satellite photos, but we had also photos from balloons, let's say, and so on. So from up, the more you go up, you will see some marks, and you will see better than, you know, from the level of standing in the middle of a field. Furthermore, now we have a lot of the LiDAR, that it's you can fly with a small plane and you can scan the area, including in the forest, and it can give you exactly the remains and a lot of, you know, details of constructions and below the surface, so that they are not visible with the naked eye if you're walking through. So, and geophysical scans also that you can, you know, scan, and they are giving you some results, and you can see there like shapes of constructions and so on. And then people, specialists, are analyzing, and then we are deciding, okay, so here seems to be a street and a neighborhood, and we would be interested to see what happened there, and you can open. And nowadays the research questions are based on, you know, projects on research on a dedicated time, that ideally they are covering some research questions, some material study, and then let's say once in 5 years or in 7 years or in 10 years, you know, you have everything published ideally, but usually it's not as simple, because you can have tons, literally tons of materials uncovered, and you need a lot of people, and of course you need to invest a lot of money. And yeah, in culture it can be problematic to invest money. It's not so usual. Let's say, in my experience, I hope that I have colleagues that are abundant in the financial aspect. But my experience is that yeah, no. If you're working in culture, you have to be very, very lucky to be abundant financially. And I think we are also not looking for it very much. I think the passion and sometimes I would call it fanatism in archaeology, combined with a bit of madness. Imagine to stay in the middle of, you know, nowhere in the sun, sometimes at 40 plus degrees in the sun, and to do not only field work, like, you know, physical work, but also intellectual work, registering everything and trying to make sense when everybody in their right mind would be on holidays. And we think we are changing the world sometimes. And oh my God, did you see this pottery shirt? This might change the chronology of the site. This is an internal joke, but nevertheless, um, it's um, it's sometimes, I think it's combined with the slight madness. At the point it can become toxic because, you know, sometimes you need to learn how to take care of yourself, but it's a wonderful feeling, I have to say. And this is why sometimes we don't know when to stop, you know, in like putting some boundaries and taking more care of ourselves, because it's really catchy and it's really, yeah, amazing. So yeah, that's how you find places. And there are the other excavations, like rescue excavations, I would say they are called, if something is built in the city or somewhere else and the area has an archaeological potential. They are archaeological companies or museums, depending on the country, that they are making, they go there and they have to make archaeological supervision and excavation before the construction starts, so they can save the heritage that's there, and they can record everything. And actually it has to be approved that the construction continues, because if you find something that it's really at a national or international degree of heritage importance, you know, then it can become difficult, but usually it's okay.
I hear a lot of skills that you have to need to have, Alexandra, for this work. It's a lot, and I hear a lot of, you know, structure, a lot of thinking, a lot of preparation, a lot of, you know, management. Before we go to, and I see your passion for sure about that, and I want to talk about your mission and, you know, to bring more spotlight into your academia work. But before we close this one and come a little bit back to Vienna, so Are there some places where you definitely, like in your lifetime, you say, this is the one I want to go, or these are the ones I want to go, so that you are going towards them? Or, every one that you go, you're like, yeah, this is the place I want to be. This is the place I want to discover. And there's no other else,
You mean excavation sites
Yes,
or
yes. So
places
what?
and
Yeah.
stuff?
So where do you want as an archaeologist? So what is the next big, the next big thing for you? I would say the dream, the North Star.
So of course, when I was younger, I was dreaming, to big excavations, let's say like Pompeii or Rome or something else. When I was a PhD student, I had the honor to excavate for several years in Ephesus, which is also on the western coast of Turkey, and it's, I think, one of the Austrian prides, I would say, because for over 125 years the Austrian Archaeological Institute, it's excavating there. I mean, there were more institutions, but I'm going to put the one which is coordinating works nowadays, and it's overwhelming. It's such a big site and such beautiful finds, and a lot of tourists, and the city itself, and the level of preservation, the experience itself, such a big team, overwhelming, amazing, beautiful. Nowadays, I would go and actually to places that are remote and that apparently, let's say, they don't have anything to offer or anything spectacular, because I wouldn't say my motto, but my belief is that everything has a story, and you don't need treasures, and you don't need spectacular things, and you don't need ancient aliens to create beauty in archaeology. This reference to ancient aliens, that, it's creating such a big, trend in pseudoscience, and actually in faking, archaeology and history and so on. And this is something I'm trying, to come with, tools, research tools, valid research tools, and show that everything has a value, and everything has a story, and a beautiful story, and an interesting story, or a sad story, because not everything is rainbows and butterflies in life. And you don't need spectacular things. You don't need piles of gold. Don't need, huge monuments. Those also have their values.
Mm.
But the difference between archaeology and other disciplines, let's say, or the difference between an object in a collection of museum that came from, let's say, an area without a context. So we know that it might come from, I don't know, let's say southern Italy, but it doesn't come from an excavation. You look at the object, it's beautiful, it's decorated, you might know the period, but it doesn't tell you the context. So in archaeology, the most important is the context. So it's coming where it's coming from. And maybe it was inherited. Maybe it was a heirloom in the family. It had an emotional attachment. Maybe it was an accessory. Maybe it was a vase. Maybe it was, I don't know, whatever, a tool to make textiles. It doesn't even matter. And sometimes we find stuff like this. And if you know the context, you can add a bit in the story of it. Some things are changing their functionality, they are adapted, they are reused, they are recycled, they are patched, repaired. It has its story, it tells you something else. And this is what is beautiful. And this is why I think we should go more towards the everyday life also of the people, because these are the majority of the people who lived, you know, in the history of humanity. And unfortunately, up until today, the accent is put on, like beauty through magnificence and luxury and everything, which has its own role, but it's a minimal part of the history. The anonymous people, they are the everyday life people who, up until today, they are all putting their shoulders to, like bake you the bread or make you the pot you're drinking from, your water or your coffee or everything, and so on. So going back to your question, I wouldn't care where I go, because I know I would make anything out of it, because for me it would be an experience to learn something about, the story of the place, and if I'm fortunate enough, some stories of some people with, the vessels they touched. Sometimes you have their fingerprints on their pottery when they were making it and stuff, and it's a travel in time. maybe it sounds cheesy, but when you see these fingerprints that were made 2000 years ago, it's goosebumps, really.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, Alexandra. Uh, since you mentioned a lot about story and everything having a story, so what is your story with Vienna?
It's been 9 years. It's gonna be 9 years soon since
Cool.
I moved here, and I would have never thought that I'm moving. If I would have left Romania, which was not in my plan, just to be clear, um, I never thought I would be moving in a German-speaking country because I ran away from German all my life. So this is a reality. I never studied German in school. I started with English and French. These were the two foreign languages besides Latin, what I studied. And German, even in faculty, I remember that I was going around and there were people, telling that, you will need it at the point if you study archaeology, because the German School of Archaeology or the German speaking countries, they play their role. I was like, I will make something out of it and I'm going to avoid it. And here I am. So I came 9 years ago. I started with some contracts at the Austrian Archaeological Institute, and in 2016, I got a job in a project in, being the field director coordinating the excavations on the ancient site of Limira in Turkey. This is the second excavation in Turkey coordinated by Austrians, by the Austrian Archaeological Institute. So I was very honored and very scared to lead and organize an excavation. I was just turning 30 back then, and to have the responsibility of a team and implementing a lot of digital tools also for recording archaeological things, because we have to update, and being in a place where I've never been before. So I started a new job with going somewhere that I've never been before. So this is how it went. And then somewhere during the pandemic, I remained without a job. So by 35, I was for the first time unemployed, without too many perspectives, because we were caught, in the house. And I was applying for fellowships, for projects, for jobs, and not only in Vienna or Austria, but all around the world, and unsuccessfully. So it was a crisis moment, because I found myself with, around 15 years or over 15 years of experience. And I thought that, yeah, it's not going to be, like so difficult, but it was an unpredictable situation during the pandemic. A lot of funds from culture were cut anyhow. So then last year, I decided to quit archaeology forever, and that made me miserable. It lasted for like half a year, and then I came back to my decision. I was like, okay, I'm even more miserable than I was before, which I didn't think it could happen. And then I decided to create my own job, because I applied outside academia and outside archaeology for hundreds of jobs, and with a lot of skills, and I was overqualified, and it was a reality check. And I tried, to understand how to repurpose myself for the real world, not as an archaeologist. And I had a lot of help and support from a lot of women communities and professional, women networks and so on, that looked at my CV and they said, no, girl, that's going to be one, maximum 2 pages. 12 pages to send for a company, it's going to be like a no-go. And I'm like, but I worked. I made this, all of this. This is my work. They're like, nobody cares. So it was a shock. It was a very, very cold shower. And then, half a year later, so at exactly a year ago, I repurposed myself. I tried a lot to understand what I want to do. And I said, okay, I'm going to try once again and see what's happening. And this when I registered at the end of last year, beginning this year, as a freelance archaeologist. And I'm working in various projects, not only academic, but I'm also figuring out, besides the classes that I'm giving, I'm also an academic mentor. So I'm doing it now on a voluntary basis for early career archaeologists, but not only. And I'm on my way to get licensed for that, because there are not so many mentors in archaeology, and if they are, most of them focus on career. And I want to also include, and I'm including things like being an international and how hard it is to move from a country to another, and how difficult it is to, like, to be alone, to be isolated. Some people are still, bullied, or there is a lot of pressure, there is a lot of hierarchy, there is a lot of toxicity, and so on. So I want to include also this as a, colleague, as a person who traveled in the past 12, 14 years all around, and live from a country to another. It's sometimes it's easier when you have somebody who understands what you're going through.
Absolutely. So value of mentors is such an important one. And I have had several of them to different situations in my life, and I still have some of them. So it's quite important, and it doesn't end up with one. It's a continuity, I would say, and it's quite important one, because once even though some of the mentorings are like for 6 months or 3 to 6 months, I would say, or up to 1 year, they stretch it out. So, but your life continues after that, and you might have achieved certain things, and I certainly did through my mentoring programs, but you need that further down, so your life doesn't stop over there. So it's not like a movie and then you cut it after 90 minutes and that's it, everybody's happy at the end of the day. No, but you just continue, and then you come another challenge and another situation, another life, and this and that. So you always need, it's like, I would say formally and informally, I would say mentors. So I think many people that come to our lives are acting as sort of mentors, even though they just touch us in a certain way. So it's just, in such a situation, and then they just kind of leave. I had many of those, people that you had such a strong connection at that point of time, and it was brief and strong, and you kind of got what you needed to continue, and then you just you wave or like catch up every now and then, but you just continue along the way. And then you have other ones that you really talk continuously, because you are working on a certain point in your life that's like not a little bit, and then you just need to unwrap it. So I'm really happy that you're and grateful that you're taking that role as a mentor. It's very important. It's very, very important. It cannot be underlined enough, importance of having someone to take time for you and guide you to the process that they went through it for many, many, many times, and just hold. And in some cases, my mentees say to me, like, just holding the space is sometimes enough. Just holding the space and saying, okay, I'm here for you. Just let's talk about everyday things. As you said, it doesn't have to be, like, as you said in archaeology, like, wow, these big things, like everyday things, every single. So because everyday things are what makes life, and not just like promotion here and then you go back, or like, a new job, a new house, a new city, and so on. So the everyday life is what makes it at the end of the day. Alexandra, I think I could talk to you for ages.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. But this is the time we have for today. I'm so happy to have you here today and hear from your story. And I wish you nothing but success, whatever you define it, however you define it, and in your life. And I wish you a lot of success with the next site visiting. And I do hope that our viewers will, get the chance to listen to this, get in touch with you, recommend it to their friends and whoever is thinking about archaeology, or maybe not. But when they hear this, maybe they will say, that's what I'm looking for. So Alexandra,
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you so much. This was so
Thank
quickly.
You too. Yes, I didn't realize
it's like went so fast. So thanks everyone for joining this morning to Alexandra and my talk. Have a wonderful summer. So I think I'll bring one more episode in July, and then it's summertime for us here. Back in August, hopefully August, September, more content coming from our side. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful summer.